Now let's understand the total fixed cost, total variable cost, total average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost with the help of a schedule. Now in this schedule, we start with production at zero level and then go on till producing 12 units. The fixed cost remains the same at all levels. It is 1000 rupees. However, the variable cost, if we closely observe, goes on increasing with the production. It is 50 rupees for 1 unit, 90 rupees for 2, 140 for 3, 196 for 4, and it goes on increasing. For the 12th unit, it is 1080 rupees. Likewise, the total cost is a sum of both the fixed cost and the variable cost, and thus the total cost also goes on increasing. Since the fixed cost is always fixed, it is constant, but the variable cost goes on increasing and total cost is a sum of both, so it goes on increasing with the increasing production. Now let's come to average fixed cost. Average fixed cost is total fixed cost divided by output. So in the first case, there will be no average fixed cost. It will be meaningless. It will be infinity because 1000 divided by 0 is meaningless. For first unit, the average fixed cost would be 1000. 1000 divided by 1000 is 1000 divided by 1 is 1000. For the second unit or two units taken together, the average fixed cost would be 500. 1000 divided by 2. For 3 units, the average fixed cost will be 1000 divided by 3, that is 333. For 4 units, it will be 250. 1000 divided by 4. So on and so forth. If you closely observe, you will see that average fixed cost is falling at all levels. As you go on increasing your production, your average fixed cost goes on falling, goes on decreasing. Now we come to average variable cost. Average variable cost for the first unit is 50 because the total variable cost is 50 and 50 divided by 1 is 50. You will not have any average variable cost for 0 units because you will not incur any cost if you produce 0 units. That is, if you do not produce, you do not incur variable cost. And for first unit it will be 50. For 2 units, the average variable cost will be 45, that is 90 divided by 2. For 3 units, the average variable cost will be 47, that is 140 divided by 3. For 4 units, it will be 49, that is 196 divided by 4. So on and so forth, we'll go till 12th unit. And for 12th unit, it will be 90, that is 1080 divided by 12. Now in this column, if you closely observe, you'll find that the average variable cost initially reduces, initially declines, initially falls, but after that level it goes on increasing. It is increasing at all levels. Now, why is this the case? Why do you think the average variable cost is reducing initially and then it goes on rising? It is because the law of variable proportion comes into play. The law of variable proportion says the more the number of factors you employ initially, higher would be the production. You will get the production at increasing rate. So since your production increases at an increasing rate, the cost per unit tends to fall. However, once you get into the second stage or the third stage, the productivity tends to go down. You tend to get the diseconomies of the scale, and thus the cost per unit then goes on increasing. Now let's see what is the case with average total cost. Average total cost is 1050 for first unit, 545 for two units, that is 1090 divided by 2. For three units it is 380, that is 1140 divided by 3, so on and so forth until the 7th, and at the 12th unit the average total cost is 173, which is 2080 divided by 12. Now again, if you closely observe here, you'll find that the average total cost is falling, and after a level it goes on rising. If we would have continued further, the average total cost would have now started rising. This is again because of the law of proportions and the economies and diseconomies of scale. Let's see what is the case with marginal cost. What is marginal cost? Marginal cost is the cost of producing one extra unit, producing one additional unit. Marginal cost can be found out by the formula total cost at n units minus total cost at n minus 1 units. Now for producing 1 unit, the total cost is 1050. Now if I produce the second unit, the total cost is 1090. So the marginal cost for producing 2 units is 1090 minus 1050, which is 40, and that is what is shown. Marginal cost for producing 3 units is total cost at 3, that is 1140, minus marginal cost, minus total cost for producing 2 units, which is 1090, and the answer is 50. So in this fashion we can find out the marginal cost. Marginal cost can also be found out with the formula change in total cost upon change in output. Now if I want to find the marginal cost for third unit, I'll need to see what is the change in the total cost. At third unit, the cost is 1140, and how much has it changed? I can find out by seeing the difference between the total cost at third unit and total cost at second unit. And then I have to see the change in number of units. At third unit, 3 units are manufactured. Before it, only 2 units were manufactured. So the answer would be 50 divided by 1 equals to 50. And this is what we calculated. So marginal cost can be found out with both the formulas. Now in case of marginal cost, let's see what is the pattern. Marginal cost, if you see, initially falls and then after a point it tends to rise and then goes on rising continuously. Let's see how average fixed cost, average variable cost, and average total cost curves look on a graph. We have understood the properties of the three curves. Average fixed cost goes on falling. Since the total fixed cost remains constant for any level of production. So as you go on increasing the production, the total fixed cost gets divided into those many number of units. So it goes on falling, it goes on coming down, it goes on coming nearer to x-axis. What is the case with average variable cost? We've seen that average variable cost starts falling initially and after a point it tends to rise continuously. So average fixed cost keeps on falling. However, average variable cost falls initially and after a point starts to rise continuously. So how do you think will the average total cost curve look? I said average total cost curve is a sum of both average fixed cost and average variable cost. So since initially initially the fixed cost is more, it takes the pattern of average fixed cost. The weight of the average fixed cost is higher. So the total cost curve follows the average fixed cost. But after a point when the average fixed cost has gone down, its weight also goes down. And what happens is the average variable cost curve rises. So the weight of average variable cost curve now increases and then the average total cost curve starts to follow the average variable cost curve. So initially it follows the pattern of average fixed cost and then it follows the pattern of average variable cost. If you observe closely, you will find that the average total cost curve and the average variable cost curve both are U-shaped. Both are U-shaped. The average total cost curve is properly U-shaped. Average variable cost curve is also U-shaped because it falls initially and then keeps on rising. Now let's add marginal cost also in this diagram. Marginal cost curve is also U-shaped. It falls initially for some time and then starts to rise and goes on rising steeply. Marginal cost is the cost of producing one extra unit. Now, since the fixed cost remains fixed at all the levels, after a point, marginal cost follows the average variable cost. Marginal cost is marginal cost gets dependent upon average variable cost. So we can say that marginal cost is not dependent upon average fixed cost, but it is dependent upon average variable cost. And you can see that it follows the pattern of average variable cost. Average variable cost curve initially falls and after a point goes on rising. Same is the case with marginal cost. Marginal cost curve initially falls and then goes on rising after a point. The only difference is the marginal cost curve rises steeply, rises sharply. Now let's understand the characteristics of all these curves. Now if you closely observe the marginal cost curve, you can see that it is cutting the average variable cost curve. It is also cutting the average fixed cost curve, and finally it is cutting the average total cost curve. In all the three cases, you can see that the marginal cost curve cuts all these curves from below. Since the marginal cost curve cuts them while it is rising, it is obvious that it will cut them from below. So in all the cases, in the case of average total cost curve, in the case of average variable cost curve, in the case of average fixed cost curve, in all the cases, the marginal cost curve cuts them from below. Now, when you come to the average total cost is minimum when the marginal cost curve cuts it. The point where the marginal cost curve is cutting the average total cost curve, you can see that the average total cost curve is minimum. The curve of the average total cost curve is at its least point, is at its minimum point. So we can say whenever the marginal cost curve will cut the average total cost curve, that point will be the minimum point, the least point on the average total cost curve. The cost at that point would be the least. Now let's understand the relation between marginal cost curve and average total cost curve. You can see that initially the average total cost curve is falling. And when the average total cost curve is falling, marginal cost curve will always be less than AC. Till the time the average total cost curve keeps on falling, the marginal cost curve will be less than it. When the average total cost curve and marginal cost curve meet, that is when the average total cost and the marginal cost are equal, average total cost will be least at that point. It will be minimum. It will be minimum. And after this point, the average total cost curve will start rising. And what will happen to the marginal cost curve? Marginal cost curve will also start rising. Now it will go above the average total cost curve. So let me repeat all three properties again. When the average total cost curve is falling, marginal cost curve is always below the average total cost curve. It is always less than the average total cost curve. And when both the curves meet, that is when the average total cost and the marginal cost are equal, you will see that the average total cost is minimum at that point. And finally, when the marginal, sorry, and finally, when the average total cost curve rises, the marginal cost curve goes above the average cost curve. It not only rises, but it also goes above it. So these are the properties of marginal cost curve and average total cost curve.